Southeast Asia as a region has had a lot of influence from Korea. And K-beauty is very much about preventative solutions. So it's about starting your anti-aging early. So previously, even before all this age anxiety discourse on TikTok, like the general recommended age you start anti-aging would be 25. And I think now it's been even more accelerated.
This is Christine Chua, WGSN beauty strategist in Singapore, and my guest on this episode of Lives of Tomorrow. Today, we're looking into the trends and drivers shaping the beauty industry in Southeast Asia. We'll get answers as to why anti-aging products are on the rise in the region. There's definitely been an increase in anti-aging discourse on platforms like TikTok. And today we're finding out what's causing this concentrated focus on aging. How does all this impact the people in this area of the world, and what does it mean for the future of the industry? I'm Carla Buzasi, CEO of WGSN, the world's leading trend forecasting company, and you're listening to Lives of Tomorrow, the WGSN podcast about how we'll live our lives in the future. So Christine, can you introduce yourself to our listeners?
I'm Christine Chua, and I'm a strategist on beauty, and I cover the entire Asia Pacific region, and I'm based in Singapore, which is in Southeast Asia and the region that we are covering today. So this is quite special to me.
Amazing. So Christine, what excites you the most from the research that you're doing and that you're seeing in the region where you are? What makes you really excited?
I think the fragrance scene has been very exciting in Southeast Asia. There's been a huge surge of local perfumers emerging in the fragrance scene. So I think compared to the past, like perfumes used to be a lot more like people buy like their Chanel No. 5. But now it's a lot more like, like young entrepreneurs are making their own perfume brands, and they're catering more to a local palate as well. Governments are having a huge moment internationally as well as in Southeast Asia, but Southeast Asia is putting their own spin on it. So there's this viral brand on TikTok again called Mykonos from Indonesia, and they have this milk perfume that went super popular.
Milk perfume?
Yes.
So it smells like milk?
I bought it myself. I don't really think it has a very strong milk scent, but I think that was kind of where their angle was. They were like, oh, it's milk, but it's not overly sweet. And they also recently launched a pandan sticky rice perfume for Indonesia's National Day, which was super cool.
Okay, so sticky rice perfume, that sounds very strange.
Yeah, so it's a more steamy, milky kind of scent, and I think it's very much unique to Southeast Asia. And within the gourmet scene itself, it's about showcasing our local foodie scene as well. I think like Southeast Asians are huge foodies, and like seeing notes like pandan and sticky rice, like even as a Southeast Asian myself, like it made me feel very proud.
But does it smell good? Do you smell like food? I
haven't actually smelled it myself, but I'm so interested in trying it.
Yeah, because I think if I've eaten or if I've been in a restaurant where the ovens or where they're cooking is very close to where I sit, and I go home and you can kind of smell food on you, that's never a particularly nice thing. But I can imagine sticky rice is very different. That's not sort of a strong meaty smell or a strong fishy smell. So, okay, I'm now intrigued.
I smelled sticky rice perfume, not from this particular brand, but I do think it's quite wearable for every day. It's not like, I smell like cookies. It's not quite like that.
Although smelling like cookies is not a bad thing either.
Yeah, well, depending on who.
And what's the kind of quirkiest? So you've told me about milk perfume, which sounds very quirky, but what's the kind of quirkiest beauty trend you're seeing in the countries that you research?
I do think the gourmet perfumes can get quite weird. I know there's one Indonesian brand called Atheraxia, and they have perfumes based on like mythological creatures. And I remember one of the notes being like blood, rancid flesh. So like that's definitely out there.
Rancid flesh,
yes.
Perfume notes. Okay, that is pretty weird. I haven't heard of that in any other country. That is a trend that needs to stay very much where it is.
I like the origin of it though. I think the idea is that by recreating these stories, it helps to evoke compassion for these tragic tales.
Really?
So I thought it's really cool. Yeah.
That is quite a nice story.
It's not actually like
it.
flesh, so like
No. I'm presuming that hasn't come into it, but someone's had to imagine what that smells like to then recreate it for that fragrance. So Yeah. Okay. That's really strange. So, Christine, I'm very interested in why specifically anti-aging products are so popular in Asia at the moment. So this isn't, I'm sitting here in London and Western world anti-aging products are very popular. And we're seeing here a rise in younger people using anti-aging products. So why do you think that's happening in your part of the world?
I'd say it's for similar reasons as the West. So Southeast Asia, the median population is probably somewhere around mid to late 20s maybe. So it's a very young population. And a lot of them are also very online as well. So it's the similar discourse as the West is getting, right? About like age anxiety, like they're scared of that, like, oh, Gen Zs look old. So I think the Gen Zs in Southeast Asia as well are feeding these very same sentiments. And that's why like a lot of them are beginning to start their anti-aging journeys as well.
Is this, I'm also going to use the word blame. I don't know if blame is the right thing, but is this is TikTok, this is social media, this isn't an anxiety that is coming from their parents? Is it very much a kind of bubbling up, do you think? Or do you think there is something in the fact that Gen Z have seen their parents get a lot more sophisticated in terms of their knowledge about anti-aging ingredients, and so they're sort of learning from family and friends?
I'd say it's actually not very much from family at all. It's very much an online discourse and very much influence from their peers. So like they're seeing their peers getting treatments like Botox early as well. And I think also Southeast Asia as a region has had a lot of influence from Korea. And K-beauty is very much about preventative solutions. So it's about starting your anti-aging early. So previously, even before all this age anxiety discourse on TikTok, like the general recommended age you start anti-aging would be 25. And I think now it's been even more accelerated.
Whose responsibility do you think it is to stop this, or do you think it's unstoppable now?
I think brands need to put regulations in place. I mean, I think parents also have a responsibility to oversee what their children are viewing in their free time and what they're allowing their children to buy as well. But I think there's only so much parents can do, like if their children are just buying things without their permission.
Yeah, because it is such a difficult one, because brands are always going to go where the money is. And if they lose market share because other brands are then leaning into that, and I'm just going to use retinols because everyone's heard of them and it's quite an obvious one, but that can cause severe irritation to young skin and isn't necessary at a really young age. But that's one of the things that is being bought in huge amounts by younger and younger people. It's sort of like, where does it end? Are you going to have 9-year-olds who are putting, vitamin A on their skin, which is just horrifying?
I think this is not APAC or Southeast Asia related, but there was a Swedish pharmacy that I think they're making retinols prescribed only for children.
Right, okay.
So I think that is probably one way you can stop it.
Yeah, it becomes a prescription. There's definitely laws changing here in terms of what people can buy when it comes to these really kind of strong ingredients. And there's definitely laws coming in terms of things like Botox, so toxins and things like that, injections, who can do them. And I think that is highly necessary. But it will be interesting to see whether people will travel. And, as you said, if it's cheaper in other countries and people are traveling for that reason, and maybe less likely to have regulation there as well.
I think what's happening more also is that like there are brands that are catering to teens specifically. So that is kind of a stopgap measure. And like a lot of these brands are also, they have dermatologist figures that are, they have like educational panels as well. And they're saying like, oh, you should just use these actives, and these other actives you should stay away from.
Yeah. So maybe that's it. Because that was another thing we saw during the pandemic, rather than it just being beautiful models advertising skincare and makeup, that suddenly as our trust in scientists evolved and because that's who we were relying on for the information, that they became part of those marketing campaigns. They were the ones who were the voices of the brand rather than the models. And it's interesting that now might be the answer to this conundrum that we've got.
And like, I remember when I was doing the Southeast Asia priorities report, one of the top concerns was like, what's it called? Like, wrinkles
crow's
under
feet.
the eyes. Yeah, crow's feet.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right.
I don't know whether that translates very well. But yeah, here we would call it crow's feet, definitely.
Yes.
It's kind of, I'm sure when I was 25, I was still worrying about spots rather than worrying about wrinkles. Now I worry about both, but at 25, I definitely was not worrying about things like Botox. That seemed like the idea of, I don't even think the phrase tweakments had been created when I was 25, but, Botox and things like that, that was something that Hollywood stars were doing. It definitely wasn't something that was accessible to normal people, but it has been so normalized now. There's a big cost. These things aren't cheap. Retinols and things like that, they're not inexpensive. If you're having tweakments, those are, I was going to say hundreds and hundreds of pounds, not pounds, from the countries that we're talking about today. But where are they getting the money from? Or what are they not spending their money on so that they can spend money on these kind of things?
So that's actually quite interesting because Thailand's actually emerging as one of the regions where people specifically go to get their Botox done because costs there are much lower.
Ah, okay.
So actually people can go get their skin injections and Botox for really cheap. And for a lot of Thai people, for example, it's just maintenance.
Okay, Christine, I want to get to know you a little bit. So I'm going to ask you some quick fire questions. First thing that comes into your head. First one, who do you look up to and why?
I guess this is a lame answer. I look up to my mom. I love her style. I think my early styling, early fashion days. I think I took a lot of inspiration from her. I just think she's so stylish. She's currently in her 60s, and I think she still looks so elegant.
Oh, that's amazing. When did you last give up on something?
I feel like I give up on a lot of things. Probably yesterday.
Tell me something you gave up on yesterday. I love that answer.
I just couldn't sleep, so I just gave up on trying.
Trying?
Sounds so depressing.
What do you rarely share about yourself?
I don't know. I'm quite an open book.
Open book. Okay. What main trend do you see right now that you think is really changing our lives?
Probably the anti-aging market, how young it's starting and its impact on children. It's not a great precedent to see.
When are you satisfied with yourself?
When I finish something. So I write reports. So every time I finish a report, I'm like, yeah.
I'm very much I have a little tick box, and I've just got a new notepad where you can write the date in at the beginning, which sounds really basic, but it says where to write the date in, and I have all my little tick boxes, and it makes me feel very satisfied if I get to the end of the day and they've actually all been ticked off. So let's move into how the future looks like for the beauty industry in Southeast Asia, but I'm also interested in how you think the beauty industry in Southeast Asia is going to impact the rest of the world. What are your big predictions?
The anti-aging market, I think we've talked so much about that earlier as well. I think it'll be more developed. I don't think it's going to be as bad a direction as I think I see in the West, though. I think a lot of brands are already pushing much gentler actives compared to retinol. They are using encapsulated forms or Bakuchiol or smaller percentages. They're positioning it as if you're using retinols for the first time.
Okay.
So I don't think it's that bad. But it's also for people who are in their 20s.
Do people care about natural or organic skincare anymore in Southeast Asia? Because that was such a huge movement, paraben-free and all of these things. And yet what you're talking about here is chemicals. They are chemicals. So where does that fit into this?
I'd say that the older generation still cares very much about organic and natural. And there's definitely still a subset of people who do. But I think the younger generation, because they're so on TikTok and they're seeing all these actives being pushed, I think that's why there's been such a huge divide.
TikTok, basically.
Yeah, I think TikTok has made a lot of trends very international.
So take your forecaster hat off for a moment and just think as a normal person. Do you feel pressure to be using anti-aging? I don't know how old you are, but you're younger than me. Do you feel pressure to be using anti-aging products at a younger age?
I'm 28 this year, so I do. Actually, generally, even before all this age anxiety discourse, the general sentiment is that you should be using anti-aging stuff starting from 25, because apparently that's when your collagen starts deteriorating. At least that's what a lot of people tell me.
Yeah. Okay. So it's definitely, this is infiltrating. This is not sort of compartmentalized, and you as a forecaster and as a human being, you're affected by it and forecasting around it as well. It's really fascinating. Do you find that and certainly in the West, and I know obviously we've got lots of Western brands that are being sold in Southeast Asia, but that the packaging is being created to appeal to that younger generation? Because I can definitely see that here.
Especially among Southeast Asian brands. I think previously they used to take a lot of inspiration from Korean beauty products. But like the cute aesthetic is still a huge thing. I wouldn't say that Southeast Asia has one particular aesthetic. Like every country is very different. Like every country has their own preferences. So it really depends.
I know. I always feel, I do feel slightly uncomfortable just talking about Southeast Asia as a place because it's so diverse. I don't even know where to start. No, exactly. It's so many countries. It's so many cultures. It's so many religions. And so obviously you have so many aesthetics that feed into that. But it is interesting how those countries affect the rest of the world and K-pop. And we talk about sort of Indonesian beauty affecting the rest of the world. The beauty trends coming out of India at the moment are really fascinating and how those are affecting the rest of the world. But whichever way you look at it, it is the East affecting the West rather than the other way around. And I think that's a big shift that we've seen and is really fascinating as a consequence. What's your final prediction for the beauty industry in your area? If you were talking to an 18-year-old, when they hit their 20s, what are the products that they will be buying, that there will be offered to them?
I mean, I've harped on this a lot. I think fragrances, like that will be like the first thing they buy. I think especially since fragrances are an affordable luxury, that will be like the first aspirational thing they buy.
Well, that's really nice. I'd much prefer that that's the answer rather than that they'll all be on some crazy retinol or that it will be some form of Botox as they're hitting their 20s. And if people think about makeup in a really classic way, they'd think about red lipstick and a black mascara. Is that over? Do you think that sort of classic makeup and that classic beauty has disappeared?
I think Southeast Asia are forming their own beauty style. I think this is coming especially strong from Thailand. I think within the Southeast Asia TikTok sphere, for a while, like people were talking about the Thai makeup style, and then they were saying like it's the perfect amalgamation of K-beauty and Western styles because like Southeast Asian features are also different compared to Koreans. And yes. So it's a bit bolder than what Koreans prefer, but also not as bold as Western interpretations.
How much is China affecting the rest? And obviously, again, I'm sort of thinking about Asia Pacific as a huge, huge region. But in the UK, we're very affected by what might be happening in France or, other European countries. We're very affected by the States. We're in K-pop. How much is China impacting the rest of Asia from the trends and the innovation that's taking place there?
I think China's influence, is spreading more towards like the Chinese diaspora in Southeast Asia because Chinese brands and like all these trends are quite hard to access if you don't know Mandarin or if you can't even access these platforms in the first place. But I think generally, especially since a lot of Southeast Asian brands are also newly emerging as well, I think they see China as like a success story, as what they want to aspire to.
Yeah, so there's also that they then want to be sold in China and have Chinese consumers also using their products.
Yeah, probably. But I do think they are looking at China and seeing how successful it is locally, and they're like, we want that as well in our own countries.
Got you. And is there any aspiration? So let's take the milk perfume, because I'm now slightly obsessed with the idea of that. Is there an aspiration there to be sold in America as an example? Or is it that we have so much to go after here and we're really proud of our culture, and so it's actually being a success in the countries where we come from?
I think currently the focus is on getting local success. I think they're not really thinking about international yet. I think maybe for Indonesia, they're probably thinking of expanding to countries with a Muslim population like Malaysia, Singapore.
So finally, Christine, are you more anxious or hopeful about the future of the beauty industry in Southeast Asia?
I think I'm quite hopeful. I don't think it's going to go down an overly negative path. I think even when it comes to trends like anti-aging, I don't really see it being as extreme as what you see in the West. I think they're kind of taking it very slow, which I think it's all right. It seems all right.
Christine, that was absolutely amazing. You did a phenomenal job. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
A big thank you to Christine Chua, beauty strategist for WGSN in Asia Pacific. Next week, WGSN's Create Tomorrow podcast will return with another episode. I'm Carla Buzasi, CEO of WGSN, and I'll see you next time.